Mr. President, Mr. Deputy Secretary General, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I join those who spoke before me in congratulating you on your well-deserved election to preside over the 70th session of the General Assembly. Your election is a befitting tribute to your distinguished political career, having served as Foreign Minister and Finance Minister of your country, and recently Speaker of the Danish Parliament. It is also a reflection of the high regard this august assembly has for your great country, Denmark. I would like to assure you of my country's full support and cooperation in discharging your duties and responsibilities. Mr. President, I wish to pay glowing tribute to your predecessor, Honorable Sam Kutesa, the Foreign Minister of Uganda, for the outstanding manner in which he steered the affairs of the 66th session of the Assembly. Indeed, this great son of the African soil has done us proud. A deserving word of appreciation also goes to our illustrious Secretary General, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, and his staff for their dedicated service and efforts in promoting the ideals and principles of the United Nations. I also commend you, your predecessor and the Secretary General, for the excellent work which has culminated into the adoption of the post-2015 development agenda and the 17 SDGs with their 169 targets. We sincerely hope that there will be reliable mechanisms of ensuring availability of means of implementation and follow-up. It was failure to have such mechanisms which was responsible for the shortfalls in the implementation of the MDGs. Mr. President, my delegation welcomes the theme designated for this general debate, namely the United Nations 70, the road ahead for peace, security, and human rights. Indeed, at 70 years, the United Nations has not only withstood the test of time, but has evolved and become a strong organization. I'm glad we all agree that a lot has been achieved in the past 7 decades. Equally, we agree that not everything that the Founding Fathers envisaged the UN could do has been done satisfactorily. The United Nations has succeeded to prevent another world war, but challenges of preserving world peace, security remain. Interstate and intrastate conflicts and wars are many and are on the increase. Terrorism has become a serious global threat. There are still too many people who live under conditions of abject poverty, squalor, and deprivation in a world of unprecedented wealth. Mr. President, unlike 70 years ago, today there is better understanding, cooperation, and partnership between countries and organizations in preserving peace and security. It is easier today for the world to come together for a cause of peace than it was before. As a matter of fact, most of the conflicts we are witnessing today are being handled first and foremost by regional and sub-regional organizations. The United Nations, therefore, must seek to forge strategic partnership with these organizations. By taking advantage of the knowledge these organizations have of the history and nature of the crisis, the key players, and the culture of the people involved, it would be easier to manage and resolve the conflicts. Where and when appropriate, the UN should invest in strengthening the capacity of these organizations and their member states in anticipating, detecting, preventing, managing, and resolving conflicts. I am of the view that this capacity is urgently needed in Africa. Mr. President, we highly commend the President of the 69th session of the General Assembly and the Chair of the Intergovernmental Negotiations on Reform of the Security Council for efforts made. It is the wish of the majority of members to see an acceleration of the negotiation process during this session. For the UN Security Council to remain what it was 70 years ago is incomprehensible and, to say the least, unacceptable. It is high time the demands of the majority of the membership of the UN are heard and heeded to. We must be mindful of the fact that the credibility of the UN depends on a more agile, representative, and responsive Security Council. Let all of us muster political courage, political will, and accomplish this long overdue task for the sake of our organization. In the meantime, we must continue to support the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly. Mr. President, peacekeeping operations remain one of the most dependable instruments of promoting world peace and security. I believe it will remain so for many years to come. I'm told there are 125,000 men and women deployed in 16 peacekeeping missions across the world. Tanzania is proud to have contributed 1,322 of these gallant people who oftentimes serve under challenging conditions. Sometimes they are compelled to serve in places where there is little or no peace to keep. Tanzania stands ready to contribute more whenever and wherever requested to do so. Mr. President, we cannot talk about security challenges of today without mentioning terrorism. This is the security challenge that the United Nations and the entire international community must remain vigilant in the coming decades. While reiterating our strongest condemnation of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, we believe there is an urgent need to bolster efforts at all levels for fighting the scourge. Collectively, we must aspire to improve our preparedness, collaboration, and response to the threat we face. Mr. President, the Ebola outbreak in West Africa last year is a stark reminder of how dangerous epidemics can be and how vulnerable we are as nations and people. More than 11,000 people lost their lives, including citizens of the US and Spain, and about 28,000 were infected. The economies of Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone were devastated. Economic activities and services almost ground to a halt, thus causing gigantic losses to the economies of the three countries. The World Bank estimates that they lost about $2.2 billion of their GDP as a result. There were about 7,000 children who lost their parents and about 500,000 people who became food insecure. More than 5 million children lost valuable schooling and skills development time. It requires mammoth recovery efforts to get these economies and societies back to where they were before the outbreak. Unfortunately, many countries in Africa also suffered, irrespective of how far these countries were from the three affected countries. The tourism industry is a case in point, where all of us are suffering. Mr. President, the biggest lesson from the handling of this Ebola outbreak in West Africa is that the world needs to be better prepared to prevent and respond to epidemics in future. This was not the case in the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. It is in this regard that we should all commend the Secretary General for the wise decision he took of establishing a high-level panel on global health crisis to come up with recommendations on how the world can respond better to public health emergencies of global concern in future. I was given the honor of chairing the panel. It is premature for me to report anything substantive now to this General Assembly. We will complete our work in December this year, and I'm sure our report will be brought before this Assembly for information and action. We look forward to your support. Mr. President, Tanzania welcomes the historic and momentous decision taken by the United States of America and the Republic of Cuba to restore diplomatic relations and open embassies of the two countries in Washington and Havana, respectively. We join the people of Cuba and the US in celebrating this landmark achievement. We commend President Barack Obama and President Raul Castro for their bold and courageous leadership. The two leaders and countries have proved to all of us the power of dialogue in finding solutions, even to deep-rooted differences and long-standing conflicts. We extend best wishes to our US and Cuban friends as they open a new chapter in their bilateral relations. We hope and appeal to the United States to lift the remaining economic sanctions, which has condemned the people of Cuba to untold socioeconomic hardships, poverty, misery for the last 50 years. Mr. President, in the same vein, it is our wish that Israel and Palestine would resume the dialogue so that their long-standing conflict can be resolved peacefully. It is high time the pain and suffering endured by the people of Palestine over the many decades was put to an end. And it is about time the people of Israel lived peacefully and harmoniously with their neighbors. It is regrettable that we are celebrating 70 years of the founding of the United Nations. This conflict remains unresolved. Tanzania subscribes and supports the two-state solution with the state of Israel and a sovereign, contiguous, and viable state of Palestine, living side by side in peace, security, harmony, mutual recognition, trust, and cooperation. We believe it is possible and achievable. All that is required of us is to double up our efforts. Mr. President, another outstanding matter which this organization has to ensure that it does not continue to be left unresolved is the issue of Western Sahara. The lack of movement on the side of the United Nations to implement its decisions on the matter is both regrettable and incomprehensible. The people of Sahara have waited for far too long to get the opportunity to determine their fate and future. Let this esteemed organization of ours muster political will and pluck up courage to do what it had long decided to do. At 70 years, the United Nations is old enough and has accumulated a lot of wisdom and experience to put this matter to rest. Please, let's do it. Mr. President, on September 20th, 2006, I stood on this very podium for the first time and addressed this august assembly as the newly elected fourth president of my dear country, the United Republic of Tanzania. Today, I'm standing here to bid farewell to all of you as I'm about to leave office at the completion of my two-term mandate as provided for in the Tanzanian Constitution. I thank all of you for the invaluable support and cooperation extended to me, my administration, and my country in the past 10 years that we have worked together. Kindly be assured that I will always value each and everyone's contribution. I feel proud to have had the opportunity to work with all of you in promoting the ideals of the United Nations and contributed to the pursuit of world peace, security, stability, and development. As I take leave of you, I would like to assure you that Tanzania shall remain faithful, a faithful member and an unwavering supporter of the United Nations organization. I'm confident that you will find in my successor a likable and dependable friend and ally. Please accord him or her the necessary support and cooperation in fulfilling his or her duties and responsibilities, because also we have a female candidate for the presidency of Tanzania. Mr. President, Mr. President, in conclusion, let me say, the road for peace, security, and development remains challenging, but worthy the journey. It requires our renewed resolve and reaffirmation of our commitment to the ideals, values, and principles laid down by the founding fathers of the United Nations 7 decades ago in San Francisco. All nations, individually and collectively, should endeavor to promote them as we have been doing in the last 70 years. It can be done. Play your part. Thank you for your kind attention.